So, a defense against the dark arts class would require some kind of knowledge about the dark arts. And it's interesting that they would be called dark because that implies a blindness. There is something that is in the dark that we cannot see. And it appears to me, after much effort of investigation, that we all have a blindness. There is something that is an unknown for each of us, and so if we start off from a humble position, that there are unknown unknowns that, if they were shown to us, that we would become better people who are no longer practitioners of dark arts and no longer victims of dark arts. I think that's the place to start in the defense against the dark arts. So that's the first step. It is the right stance. When you play a sport, you learn a stance. When you play a position within any kind of organization, there will be the stance that is appropriate for the situation. And so the proper stance for defense against the dark arts is humility. That's my claim. It's the humility, it's the humble position of knowing that there is an unknown. There's something that is in the dark, and while it is in the dark, we are practitioners of the dark arts and victims of the dark arts. So that's the first step. To imagine that we are not practicing the dark arts, that we are not participating in that which causes harm, pain and suffering and exploitation and sacrifice of others. To imagine that we are doing that is not humble. It's pride. And that brings us to the 7 deadly sins. Pride being the one I'm most familiar with. Having entertained the notion that I could be and that I was the Mashiach ben David, that I was special, I would claim that I'm one of the most, I've experienced what it's like to be one of the most prideful human beings on earth, or one of the most prideful human beings in existence. So I'm speaking from experience and my own bias, which results in ability to see some things and be blind to other things. And so the pride can come naturally for many people, if not all people. And that's the thing with these 7 deadly sins, is that it's kind of our default. It's the Creator created us in such a way that we do these things. And I have faith that these things are in us for good reasons. Also, when we do not learn to put forth effort to resist that which is in us, that was created within us, that allows us to cause harm to ourselves and others, to participate in those dark arts, that pain is caused, and that is a signal which is supposed to teach us to put forth effort in order to respect and be careful with ourselves, with our the creation which we are, which was created. And so then the pain signal motivates us. It's meant to motivate us to put forth the effort in order to do things like practicing, doing the practices. And so we practice a humility to deal with the pain. So I've heard it said by at least one person, maybe a couple, that they've seen that I'm humble. And I said, I've just got you fooled. You are tricked, because all that is that I'm the most prideful human being on earth, and I practice the humility. And in practicing it, that's what gets noticed. And people say, oh, he's humble. When in reality, it's like, no, this is the thing that is my biggest weakness, is pride. And it's the intentional effort combined with some amount of discipline, which would be the countermeasure to sloth, which makes it appear as if I'm a humble person, which I'm not. And that's the thing about anytime you look at anyone and you see something that looks like a virtue, which would be like the countermeasure to the sin, the natural state, the default mode and the way we were created, which is not all bad, which is good. but does cause pain and suffering within ourselves and others as we avoid learning to do our practices that look like virtues. What happens is people will be tricked into thinking that the prideful person is humble. And in reality, the prideful person is LARPing as a humble person, and for good reason, because that pride can be so dangerous and can cause so much pain and destruction. Similarly with the other ones, like, for example, lust. So lust is, behind lust is something good. It's our natural disposition, but we do have to put forth the effort. And there's so many ways to put forth the effort, and I think we need to learn those ways. This is how we practice defending ourselves against ourselves as practitioners of the dark arts, is we have to develop practices. We have to practice. And that might mean uninstalling Facebook for some people. For other people, it might mean curating a Facebook experience which does not include this temptation that would be related to your lust. And so similarly, you have to be careful with everything that's going into your mind, attempting to curate an experience through your practices in order to deal with the fact that I'm a man who wants to make babies, right? So there's many men who know that experience, and therefore you should know that there are practices we can do that would cause us to have more or less temptation. And so the person who appears to have that virtue of chastity, in all actuality, they may be one of the most lustful people, and because of an awareness of the danger of that lust, they have curated an experience, and intentionally curated an experience combined with that discipline in order to appear to be someone who has the virtue of chastity, right? Similar to how I might curate an experience where it appears that I'm a humble person. Others may curate an experience where they appear to be someone who has the virtue of chastity. And I think that's true for like all of these sins, like gluttony, for example, or greed, or wrath, or sloth, or envy. And I've tasted all of these sins. And so, yeah, the defense against the dark arts requires an understanding of who we are, so a kind of self-awareness, and a kind of empathy for realizing that there are similarities among all of us throughout all of creation, and an awareness that these things come from a good place. They are there for a reason, and that if we are not careful and we are not attempting to do our practices and resist becoming victims of our natural ways by putting forth the effort and curating our experiences in our lives through practices, then we experience the pain and the suffering, and we cause the pain and the suffering, and we are practitioners of the dark arts. So there are many people who are more interested. Let's see, all the people who are doing the dark arts are people who are in bondage to sin, and we all do it. And so anytime I try to point at anyone who we might think are the worst practitioners, or maybe the best practitioners, the ones who are most proficient at the dark arts, who have learned to exploit and sacrifice humans for their own benefit, they cause pain and suffering of others for their own benefit. In reality, it's in all of us. We all, if we look deeply, that we'll notice that the thing that is within those who we would point at and accuse of being the practitioners of dark arts, we could see that, that's in us too. And what is required is the curation of new practices, new experiences, such that we can resist becoming and being a practitioner of the dark arts, and become a light ourselves and with others. We become a light. We become a light on a hill, And the prayer and the hope would be that those who are the practitioners will become attracted to the light. We'll see that those who are filled with light are experiencing a life that appears to be more satisfying than the life of those who are are regularly practicing the dark arts and avoiding the curating of practices and experiences such that they could be a light, become part of the light. So the darkness, which is within all of us, which we are practitioners of, is in there. It was created. And it results in pain and suffering, and to some degree. And that was created within us as well. And I believe it's meant to motivate us towards the light, towards putting forth the effort and learning the practices and curating the kind of life which would be good, such that we become leaders who shine brightly. There you have it. There's another entry. There's another attempt at teaching about defense against the dark arts. Bye-bye.